That's what your estate ultimately is. And you can improve on that. You can say, okay, well, my estate's now going to grow, to change, to become this. I'm going to create a will for it. And a will for the government. I mean, what's the will of the Legislative Assembly? It's the statutes they create, right? That's the will of their estate. They're doing it all the time. We don't do this because we don't know what's going on. So we never actually create anything of real substance or value for our estate because we don't even know our estate exists. We just don't know. It's kept from us. It was created for us on the day we were born, and then we just disappeared, never came back ever again. They've never seen us.
Just fall back on the other side.
Because we've been living over there our entire lives. We're told, and I should clarify, by the way, let's put that over there a little bit. They send us this document in the mail, and they used to actually send a letter with it that stated, don't use this as ID. They don't anymore, but they even tell you don't use it as ID. What's the first thing we did with it? Use as ID, okay? So people always want to go back now and a recourse for fraud and all this kind of stuff against the government for screwing them over all these years. They told you not to use it as ID. Do you have any recourse? No, you used it as ID. And you, again, ignorance of the law is no excuse. You should know that when you use a name, you assume all liability attached to that name. And what's attached to this name? Right? Statutes, taxes, liabilities, jail, compliance with whatever the government passes next week. That's what's attached to that name. If you use that, you accept that. Right? What's the proof that the government has that you accepted that document? Whether or not it was mailed to you or presented to you properly. You used it.
You have to use it to have other kind of ID. If you want driver's license or
That's what they tell us.
Just say, yeah.
That's what they say.
If you want your social insurance number, you have to present your birth certificate.
We're going to get into that. Okay. They say all that. There's a reason for that. Okay?
Can I ask a question? You're
Yep.
separating those.
Absolutely. I'll probably...
Do everyone on this earth has those two documents?
No.
So,
I doubt everybody on earth has these documents.
okay, so it's possible that if you live in Quebec, I don't know what the
No,
other province-
we're all IMF here. Same thing. I'm thinking more like Uganda, somebody living in the mountains.
Okay, but I just want to talk about an exception here.
Okay, can we bring it up afterwards? Because I know, like yesterday, everybody just kind of wanted to wait till I was done with everything before because sometimes I answer these questions by the time we're done. Yeah, but we'll talk about it afterwards, at the end. I'll take questions, we'll go over anything you want to, and it may get answered by then. Okay. Because now I actually lost what the train of thought I was going on here. Okay, yeah, they send you this.
When you agree to use it, you didn't agree to all the terms.
Yeah, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if you agreed to the terms. You used the document. You're supposed to do your due diligence before you do anything, right? That's what people who want to assume liability for all their actions do, right? And it doesn't matter if we didn't know what using that name all entailed. We started using it. We agreed to it. That's law. That's the way law operates. Okay? It's not a contract. We're gonna, okay, let's, it's not a contract if my neighbor tells me, yeah, you can use my truck, but it's gonna cost you $1, and then I use the truck. Okay? It's an implied contract. He gave me notice, and he told me, and they did give you notice, don't use this as ID. That's notice. As soon as you use this as ID, you accept it, any liabilities that went along with it. But just wait. So I'm going to come full circle into why that actually doesn't matter. I'm getting to that, but this is the scam we've been living in, that we've been led to believe. You need to produce the birth certificate to operate in society. You need to produce it to get a driver's license. You need to produce it to get a social insurance number and work anywhere. You need to produce it to get privileges. Okay? Now this is the interesting thing. So if, like they say, driving is a privilege, what document do you produce to get the driver's license? Birth certificate. Okay?
I got
Possibly not. The assumption is still there, though. The only thing you can, the only way you can get a driver's license is by having a birth certificate. It's all tied back to the birth certificate, whether you produce it at the window or not. Okay?
Have you ever had one? I never had one until I was 7.
It's entirely possible, but this is the way the system's been working now for a good 50 years. You may not have had one before, but you would have had some proof of citizenship of some sort. Okay? A SIN number. Again, especially now, the only way to get a SIN number is by producing a birth certificate. Right? You want a SIN number, you gotta have a birth certificate. You want a health card? Birth certificate. All that stuff goes back to the birth certificate. And can they ask for the driver's license back? Yes. Can they ask for the SIN number back? Yes, they can ask for all that back. Can they ask for the health card back? Yes. Can they ask for the birth certificate back? Yes. Yes, they can. It's theirs. They know it's theirs. They can ask for it back. And they tell you driving is a privilege. You get a driver's license from the birth certificate. Okay? Traveling and driving are supposed to be rights. So that tells us that they're not infringing on our rights. Something else is going on. We've come across the board onto their side. If something's a privilege, it's not a right. Those two are mutually exclusive events. You cannot regulate a right. Well, on this side of the equation, we've got a bunch of privileges. We know that if the driver's license comes from the birth certificate, and to have that driver's license is a privilege, then this document is extended privileges, which means rights are not attached to it. This is all just deductive reasoning.
Can you say that again? And is it also the case if you don't need it?
We'll get into all that, okay?
I'm just asking hypothetically.
Yeah,
I'm not
write it down, and we'll go over it all afterwards. So the privileges are attached to the driver's license. If a privilege is attached to it, then it's not a right. Then it doesn't represent our rights. If it doesn't represent our rights, how can it represent me? Because I have inherent rights. So this is where we're going to get on to if something else is going on here, and I'm going to explain that. Right? And again, I forgot where I was going with that. Just let me rant for a while. We'll go back over and answer any questions you guys want to go on. I get in a train of thought, and I kind of have to keep with it sometimes. So something else is going on here. Now, I can go on at this point. I'll probably come back if there's something I forgot about, except that, yeah, I've got inherent rights over here, and over here we got privileges, right? Privileges are not rights. So we got two different entities going on here, if you want to call it that. So let's talk about Canada for a minute, very briefly. People are really concerned with what Canada is, going all as deep into their statutes as they possibly can to come up with, oh, I found something about Canada buried at the very bottom of the statute, and now I know the scam that's going on, right? Or something else. It's like they have to prove what Canada is to be able to prove that Canada doesn't have jurisdiction over them. And that's actually the opposite, which is why I talked about that earlier. It's the difference between the me and the them bubble. Okay, Canada is them. How do I know what Canada is? I can identify it in 50 seconds or less, okay? The Charter and Rights and Freedoms, which is 1 to 32 of the Greater Act, the Constitution Act of Canada, 1982, which is numbers 1 through 52, where number 52 states it's the supreme law of Canada. This is it. This is Canada. That document defines what Canada is, which means that is Canada. That is Schedule B to the Canada Act, 1982 in the United Kingdom. That is a memorandum of agreement. It's not even a law that was passed. And it's a memorandum of agreement to rename the British North America Act of 1867. That's what Canada is. Period. Okay? If it's a piece of legislation passed in the UK, what does that make Canada? A foreign power. It doesn't matter if they're a corporation. If they're subcontracted from the Queen or from the IMF to regulate things on this landmass and hold titles in trust, allegedly to protect the greater good, which is exactly what's going on, that's fine. But I'm more interested in the fact that they're a foreign power. Okay? That means they're foreign to this landmass. They know they are. They're de facto. They govern because no one else did. We were given the right to do it as a people when we could still be held as subjects of the Queen, or the King back then in 1931 with the Statute of Westminster. We were told to go create our own charter and create our own government. Did we? No. Yeah, we didn't create our own government. So, well, the one that was still here just kind of stayed around and kept governing. That's what de facto means, right? They're just governing de facto. Is that a bad thing? No. Actually, not at all, because they have rules, they have things they're supposed to do, and things they can't violate, and they don't, believe me. They got this scam right down to a T. It's about duping us into leaving our protected inherent rights and entering their jurisdiction. They're getting us to come into the B bubble, into them. All by consent, all voluntary. It's up to us to know the rules if we're going to go and play their game. So it's our fault if we don't. They're not liable for our ignorance. Whether they've done it by putting us in their public education schools to teach us incorrectly what our rights are, it's our parents' duty and ours to learn our own rights. It's not their duty to teach us anything. Okay? So that's the point of why I'm trying to teach this stuff to all the people now, because if it's our duty, then it's also my duty to make sure that I'm teaching people their rights and who they really are.
If they're guaranteeing, the rights say guaranteeing.
They're not guaranteeing
Somebody
anything.
thought if they're trying to guarantee, they should start off by telling you what they are.
No. They're under no obligation to tell you anything, and any statute or piece of legislation they pass where they say they're guaranteeing to protect your rights, who are they talking about when they say your? Talking about that guy. Period.
Okay, so they'll tell you that.
Only that guy. They're not going to tell you nothing.
Okay.
They want to keep the scam going. They want you to believe you're only the title that is the name on the birth certificate, because that's the only thing they have jurisdiction over. Period. It's a title. They never have jurisdiction over a man. They have jurisdiction over a man when he operates through a title, that he is liable for whatever actions he does through that title. Okay? Is it a valid excuse when you do something that's out of the jurisdiction of your office at the corporation you work at? When the janitor goes into the boardroom and signs a contract for the company and causes damage and does a bunch of other shit, and then they come back to him and he says, "Hey, I'm a man." No, you're the janitor. You're not supposed to be doing that. Okay? We're liable because it's the title we operate through. We'll get more into that. So that we know what Canada is now. We know they can't violate our rights, so they don't. We know that Canada is a foreign power. Is that a bad thing? No. It can be, it can't be. It depends on how much they abuse it and how much we figure out that they're abusing it, and they are. Okay? I love it when people send me case law that backs up what I say, because I usually just kind of go through this stuff and I figure it all common sense, especially from information other people have given me. And as soon as I went through the Charter and Rights and Freedoms, or the Constitution Act of Canada, and I read section 52 and then I read 32 and I went backwards. And 52 says the supreme law of Canada, that's it. Nothing is higher than this law. This is Canada. And anything that's inconsistent with this charter is of no force or effect. Okay, that sounds pretty good. Let's go back to section 32. It only applies to the government. That's it. Okay? That's common sense. If Coca-Cola, the charter of Coca-Cola, the articles of incorporation that created Coca-Cola, wouldn't their charter probably say the same thing? This is the documents that create Coca-Cola are the supreme law of Coca-Cola, and it's only common sense that it only applies to Coca-Cola. That's just common sense. So we know that already. That just confirms it, that they are telling us in their statute, if we want to read it, which most people don't, because they got 20 years of hockey statistics up here. Okay? And they can't take 5 minutes of their time to read a charter, point 1 through 52, that tells you everything you ever want to know. It's right there. That's, again, why we have no recourse. If we can't read 52 lines of a document to figure out for ourselves that they have no jurisdiction or authority over us, then I guess that is our own stupidity. Okay? I looked in the mirror myself a couple years back and said, yeah, I'm the problem. But once I know and I figure it out and they still continue to harm me, now we're talking a different ballgame. So we're going to get onto that later. So sure as shit, I swear, by the way, I apologize if anybody's offended by that. I'm a contractor. I find that people don't listen sometimes until I swear a little bit. So, yeah, that's my malfunction, right? You know, oh, you haven't moved that pile of lumber yet. I think we should sit down and talk and go over why you should move that pile of lumber when I asked you to move that earlier on this morning, okay? No, I'm pretty angry by the third time I have to say something to somebody, so that's where you start, you know, yell at people. I've been doing it so long, but people pay attention. Well, they love getting yelled at. People are calling me all the time, man, can you do a seminar? I love getting yelled at. So now I'm here doing it. Okay, so somebody sent me an email recently that, and it was a friend of mine in Saskatchewan, and he looked up and he went and found the actual case law that turns out backs up exactly what I'm saying about 52 and 32 in terms I could not have said. They were so precise. I read it and I just went, you've got to be frickin' kidding me. And here's the judge right there. In 3 lines or less, the guy laid it all out for you, the interpretation of what that means. And sure as shit, it means this is the supreme law of Canada. Anything that's inconsistent is of no force or effect. Period. End of story. And it turns out that it goes on to further say that the judge and the court has a duty to protect you from anything that is inconsistent with that charter. Well, that's good. And then 32 says, in no uncertain terms in the case law that we found,
What's the title?
actually, they're both of them together are R versus Dell and R versus, what is it, Big M Drug Mart?
Yes.
Big M Drug Mart. I always get that wrong. It's Big M Drug Mart. R versus Dell and R versus Big M Drug Mart. And if you guys watch the Chilliwack video, the guy was nice enough to list and... There you go. Okay. So Grasshopper Media has a 10-minute clip on it. But the case law is there. I can make sure that it gets sent out to everybody on the email list if everybody makes sure they put their email on there. Unless they think I'm really a reptilian. And I just wanted to get your email so I can come find you later. Okay? What's that?
There's a wrist showing up here. That's what I was saying.
Yeah. No, I know. I thought the same thing, actually, when I first got involved in the movement way back in the day. I was like, man, I don't even want to go meet with people I meet online. They're probably going to be undercover cop, and they're going to be watching me, right? Yeah, paranoia. I should have gone over that earlier, actually, because it's legit. I'm actually not making fun of people. That happens. I went through the paranoia phase myself. Like, you think even for a couple of years at one point where I was like, you know? And that's the fear part of everything, because you don't understand what's going on, so you're scared. It's fear. Once that goes away, you have no fear anymore. When you know what's going on, you're comfortable with your position, and that's why I was talking about that with Cord earlier. The fear goes away. You don't care anymore. Then you're up on YouTube telling everybody their rights, and you don't care, right? I used to make sure all my blinds were drawn at night before I went to bed, kind of thing, you know, like waiting for a red dot to come through my window like 4 years ago or something like that. Now I leave them all open, you know, I'm sitting there reading, just don't care. I certainly have more faith in the Pope. Yeah. Pope doesn't leave Vatican City without being surrounded by 8 miles of bulletproof glass. Right? I don't give a shit. One of you might pull out a gun and shoot me right now. I don't care. Yeah, exactly. Okay. So it's right there for us. Somebody sent me the case law, backing up everything that I just said. And not only that, but I think the one about number 32, I think that was R versus Dell. Maybe not. Either way, it's one of the two. The judgment goes on to say, in no uncertain terms, the charter does not apply to interactions between private citizens. And before that, it went on to say that whether it's a corporation or an individual, it still doesn't apply. So all these people that tell me, oh man, the government, when they pass a law, it encompasses all commerce, even on Mars. Anywhere in the universe, the government passes a law, they say they can tax somebody. It applies equally among the stars. No, it doesn't. It only applies to the government. Government business. That's it. And it goes on to say further from that it's not enough even that the government can say you are performing or doing something for the government, contracting for them, hauling gravel on the highway by contract. You have to be working for the government and actually performing a specific function of government under a government policy to be considered government for that charter to apply to you. So having said all that, and these are Supreme Court decisions. Having said all that, if that charter does not apply to you, and it makes it very clear in no uncertain terms, it does not apply to the private person, private individual, private citizen, corporation, I don't care. If you're not performing a specific function of government, it doesn't apply to you. If that charter doesn't apply to you, and it is the supreme law of Canada, how can any statute they pass possibly apply to you in the private or as a non-government entity of any kind? It can't, because it would be of no force or effect at all. Now, can the government pass legislation that conflicts with the Charter of Rights and Freedoms? Of course they can. They'll pass anything. They'll pass a law tomorrow that says I can't be holding a black marker. They'll pass anything. They don't care. Does it have any force or effect? No, it's inconsistent with the Charter. Unless you believe they're crap. That's the big thing. They have to get you to believe they're crap. What's that? Well, yes. Now here's the problem. It's not forced on you. Because they gather evidence against you. So we're going to get into the courtroom stuff about why it's actually not forced on you. They have every reason to believe that you are committing a crime in contravention of that act. And that's because we're not making sure that we clarify matters, for instance, when we get pulled over. Because once you do this once or twice, on the computer it's going to say, don't even bother. Right? Until then, they've still got you classified as a peon on their computer. You got a capital P on your file. It says peon. They know you don't know your rights, and they have little fear of you. Okay. So that's the statutes backing all this. So what's happened? Canada's a foreign power. Their statutes only apply to them. They're here to keep records for our protection and our benefit. This is all actually sounding pretty good so far. It's really not a bad thing once we understand what's going on. The birth certificate name is not even really a bad thing, right? So we'll get into that more. So what we do is, what we have now is we'll jump back across the line over here, and I call this the jurisdictional boundary, right here. It's government's a mirror. Government mirrors what we do. I'm sure if you guys have been watching enough videos online, you get into all the ecclesiastical stuff that all the elites and stuff like that are into about as above, so below. Everything's a mirror, which is what that means, and that's exactly what's going on here. Government just mirrors everything that we do. They give us everything we ask for. Sometimes we don't want what we ask for because it always has liabilities attached to it. That's not a good thing. The other thing to be said about this, and the reason it's not a bad thing, is because most people need to be governed. Okay? Most people aren't competent of governing themselves. And that's Benjamin Franklin, I think, coming out of signing the Declaration of Independence, right? What kind of government do you create? Oh, it's a republic if you can keep it. And you want to say, but govern yourself. That's what a republic is. Govern yourself. Because if you don't govern yourself, you will be governed. That's over there. You got no choice in the matter once you're not governing yourself. They will govern you. So this doesn't mean, oh man, I know who I am now. Woo! Let's go party, drink, and drive and go harm as many people as possible because I can't be held accountable. No, you will be governed. You are responsible for your actions. That's what a sovereign and free man is. Your level of freedom depends on your level of willingness to accept liability for your actions, right? The more you assume for liability, the more free you will be. You do no harm. You don't harm people. You don't do unto others as you would not have them do unto yourself. Wise words. I think they're in a book somewhere. If people still read. Other than the hockey statistics, right? Yeah, I'm waiting for the video version of the Bible to come out. Okay. So it.
That's the golden rule.
It
in the Bible. It's love thy neighbor as thyself.
Okay. Yeah, it's the same thing.
That golden rule is.
Yes, I agree with that.
Just say.
So, and actually to clarify on that more even, I tell people, I come up with these really logical and common sense things that turn out to have sources somewhere else. And I always tell people, they're like, well, man, everybody wants to take information they get on the internet or at free man meetings and everything, or something they discovered themselves. Like, oh, man, I found this piece of information. Ha! It's mine. I'm going to be the only free person, right? No, you can never be the only free person. You are only as free as your neighbor. I've been telling people that for I don't know how long, and somebody's like, oh yeah, I think that's written in a pretty famous book somewhere too. You're only as free as your neighbor, right? How can I be free if I'm the only one? I'm just in a different type of prison now. That's all it is. So I have to make everybody just as free as me, otherwise I'm not free. That's why it's a duty, it's an obligation on me, and that's why I'm out there doing it for not $5,000 a head, telling people I've got a fancy document if they just sign it, that everybody's going to run in terror from them. No. We get the government we deserve. We deserve to be regulated from morning till night and even while we sleep because we are incompetent. We don't assume liability for anything. We want to get insurance on our cars and drive like a moron because we know it's going to be covered when we get in an accident. We deserve everything we've got. We don't want to learn our rights. We don't want to be responsible. We want everything now, and we don't want to be responsible for it if something breaks. Right? Throw it in the garbage, go buy another one. They are a reflection of us. If we want government to not be the way they are, then that means we have to change who we are and assume liability for our own actions to reduce their interaction with us in life. We just don't need them anymore because we're all being responsible now, right? That's the purpose of most of the tour, to get that message across to people, on top of letting them know who they are. Okay, so to be involved and to be recognized by government and commerce and everything else, you can't be just a man. So now we've covered what that is, and I went off on one of my little rants. We've got this truck that our parents created for us. In another video, I told people, I said, if you want to put it in terms of admiralty law and commerce vessels on the high seas, then we can talk about boats if you want. It's a boat, sure. And I think I drew a little picture in the Chilliwack conference there that our parents built this fantastic battleship to go on the oceans of commerce with when we were kids. And it was there for us to claim anytime we wanted to. It's been in dry dock. It's got inherent rights and freedoms attached that no one can take away. Not too many. Nobody can damage us over there. It's this mighty warship on the seas of commerce. And we don't know about it. It's been sitting in the backyard. Government's got legal title to it. It's protected. It's sitting there for us, just waiting for us. And we got talked into believing that we were one of the canoes that they gave us to use instead, right? It's got privileges attached to it that can be taken away. It can be taxed, has to obey statutes. Anything that's owed is owed to them. We're the trustee of it, which means when they say jump, we're supposed to say how high. When a cop pulls you over and you pull out a driver's license, and you say, no, I've got rights. He's like, no, I know differently, dude. You just gave me evidence that you have no rights. You have privileges, and I'm your superior officer, and I can do anything I want, like drag you out of your car right now and beat you to within an inch of your life and haul you off to jail. And he's right. He's a superior officer on that side of the equation. That's what's going on. Driving is a privilege. You can be taxed, so I'm going to write you out a traffic charge. Over here, we've had something available the whole time. It was non-taxable. Who do I pay tribute to over here? Me. Who's Caesar on this side of the equation? Me. If somebody wants to use the equity in my title, who do they owe the money to? Me. That's the side of the equation we want to be on, where we're supposed to be realizing the benefits of the natural resources, the land, everything the government regulates for us. That's where we're supposed to be receiving our benefits. Has that guy ever turned up since the day he was born? No. It's an abandoned claim.
7 years old, they have sounders on it.
Yeah. So you can reclaim it any time, though. Anytime. Absolutely. So the other part of that is Canada's foreign. They're a foreign power. This ID they created for you over here is an agent of the government, an agent of the crown. That's what that ID represents. What they created for you to use was an agent of the crown. Again, what does government have jurisdiction over according to those Supreme Court case sites? Anything that is acting as an agent of the government. And it says that right in there. Okay? This is the agent. When you're acting through that license, That is the capacity you are acting in. You're liable for your actions in that capacity. When you are acting as that, you are acting as an agent of the Crown. Okay? Now, this is where it starts to get fun. Just because I produce a license to do something, does that mean I'm doing that act? No. When they ask for a driver's license, I'm obligated to turn it over to them. It's their property. Does that prove anything? No. But it's evidence. The charges always say that the police officer has reason to believe that at such and such a time in such and such a place, this person did commit the following crime. He only has reason to believe. He's not saying you did it. He's not even saying you definitely were acting as an agent of the government. He's only saying he has reason to believe, and his reason to believe that is you gave him a driver's license. The rest is presumption, and you don't rebut that presumption. You don't know what to rebut. You walk into court saying, I'm a man and I don't have to do anything you say. Right? Courts operate on presumptions. They never bring one fact into the courtroom. Whoever brings the first fact wins. Because there never is one. I think that's even an oath that lawyers and judges swear, that no law or fact is to be brought into the courtroom, ever. If they do, they'd probably be disbarred the next day. They never bring a fact into the courtroom. It's not even allowed. If we bring in a fact, as people now, once we know who we are, we start bringing in facts, who's going to win? You, every time. Hopefully. Unless you hire a lawyer, because he's under the same oath.
What's the difference?
Your lawyer will never bring in a fact.
Present in fact the example of a fact versus
Well, a fact is a fact. A presumption is a presumption. A fact beats a fact beats a presumption every time. One's
give me an example of a fact you might bring into the court.
a fact. How about we get into that? But remind me about that, because I am going to get onto that. That's why this starts to dismantle the system when you know who you are, because you can bring facts in. Then you got to read up on what a fact is. We can talk about that right now. What is this? What do you call this?
Marker.
Okay, you call it a marker. What do you guys call it? Pen? Yeah. Stylus. Okay. We could call it 10 different things. Yeah, if I take this and I go and hit somebody with it, now it's a weapon, right? There you go. So these are all names for this thing. When does it become a fact what it is? When two people agree that this is called a marker or a pen. Now that's a fact. Until then, we all have different names for it. It's just a presumption, right? We don't know what it is. It's evident. We're all giving evidence of what this is. I have reason to believe this is a pen. I have reason to believe this is a marker. You agree with me? Is this a marker? Now it's a marker. Before then, I only had reason to believe it was a marker. Now two of us agree. Now it's a fact.
But like she's saying though, if you're going into court and you're alone,
We're going to get into that.
who's gonna
How to establish facts.
And who is that person?
Very easy.
Somebody
Okay, we'll get into that.
establish something false.
Okay, let's pretend I have a fishing license. I don't. I like to use simple examples. You guys can make it more complicated after that. I have a fishing license. I'm lying, I don't. I'm sitting in my beach house back in Manitoba. And man, I love sitting in my beach house on a Friday night, just sitting beside the wood stove and having a beer and drinking a book. Right? I'll be reading, I'm not watching hockey, believe it or not. I don't own TV, in fact. Yeah. I'll be reading Aylmer Québec's Law of Nations, and my brain will get tired from reading that, and I'll put that down, then I'll pick up one of my fantasy novels instead, and I'll read that for the rest of the night. But I'm reading. I'm beside my wood stove and chilling out. Having a beer, like having a beer or a glass of red wine. And it's about 10 o'clock at night, and I'm just chilling, and all of a sudden my door gets kicked in. And in comes a SWAT team. And they point a gun at my head. Fishing license, now! Holy shit. Here you go. Oh, I see you're drinking a beer. Yeah, I'm having a beer. Don't you know you're not allowed to drink beer and fish? That's true. It's against the law to fish and drink a beer in Manitoba. Even in an ice shack, on a boat, don't matter. It's against the law. Okay? Is he factually correct? If he was to charge me for drinking a beer while fishing? Well, that's the good question. When was I fishing? Right? But when that charge goes to court, all it's going to be on there is, has reason to believe that I did commit the following crime because they got me with a beer and a fishing license. Everything else that happened is not in the charge. The judge has no idea I was in my living room. The judge has no idea I was sitting in my rocking chair beside my wood stove. The judge has no idea of any of that because it's not in the complaint. They leave that out. Imagine that. Okay? So all they see is beer, fishing license. And I was drinking a beer when I produced a fishing license. That's it. That's the presumption that they're going on. All right? Sounds ridiculous, but every charge you are ever charged with is just that simple. They pull you over for speeding, license and registration. Okay? First thing you do is you pull out your driver's license, give it to the cop. Pull out your registration, give it to the cop. You don't want to be beaten up. That's fine. Give him the driver's license. He has reason to believe you were driving and speeding and breaking the following statute. Okay? It's the same scenario. Well, that's all fine and dandy, but when was I performing a function of government? Your statutes only apply when someone's performing a function of government. Have you mistaken me for an agent of the Crown? When was I on the books? Can you provide payroll records? Can you produce one fact that demonstrates at the time you claim that I broke this law, that I was acting as an agent of the Crown? No. But that never comes up because you walk into the courtroom screaming, I'm a man.
There's more to the Constitution than the Charter. There's other sections.
It's irrelevant. Doesn't matter. The Supreme Law of Canada says that the Charter only applies to agents of the government when performing a function of government. Anything else is irrelevant. We'll talk about that.
It has to do with rights. So enforcing rights only has to do
The
with
rights of who?
But there's other statutes that allow them
Statutes.
that are outside the Charter.
No. You'll get it. They're below the Charter.
Constitution that are outside the Charter.
They're below the Charter. This is the Supreme Law of Canada.
But if you look, they're all rights. It has to do with rights.
Doesn't
I
matter.
can give you a case law, the margarine.
Rights of this. Rights of this.
I won't argue
I know.
anymore. Look up the margarine reference.
Rights of this. I know about the margin reference. I know about all that kind of stuff. I'm keeping the basics here today. And this is absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. If people want to make it complicated and start reading into statutes again to disprove this, that's great because statutes exist over here. Statutory jurisdiction. I don't care about statutory jurisdiction. Okay? I don't need a document from them to tell me what my rights are. I already know what my rights are. They weren't granted by the government. They can't pass a law that restricts them in any way, shape, or form ever. Period. And their charter says that. And they know that. They're a foreign power, and when you're acting as an agent for them, you're now a foreigner to this land as well, and that's what gives them the jurisdiction over you. Okay? Read the Bible. Who can the king tax? Foreigners.
So the criminal code in your argument is unconstitutional.
Absolutely. Not at all. I'm not getting into that. Abs- Let's talk about that afterwards, but you better believe it doesn't apply to me.
I didn't say it didn't apply to you, but I'm saying it's unconstitutional.
I guarantee you that 90% of the things in that book violate the Constitution and are of no force or effect, but they were passed anyways. Yes.
Code is unconstitutional.
Probably 90% of it is.
Under the Charter?
Of course it is. We'll get into constitutional challenges or jurisdictional challenges afterwards. But for right now, I'm trying to say, we're getting into some of the court stuff now about why this actually turns out to be not a bad thing at all. The problem is, you're giving them evidence that they can use against you. It's only evidence, nothing's a fact, and that evidence leads them to presumptions and allows them to operate in court against you without really raising any facts, right? Again, all the judge sees is beer and license. And then the Crown provides a law that says you can't drink while fishing. They don't talk about the fact that you weren't fishing. Ever.
Can it be different if you've got a witness with you?
Well, now we'll get into how you start to remedy that, because all you need to do is to know the scam. Then you can figure out your own ways of exposing the scam and producing a fact that demonstrates something else. Okay? And the charter itself says that once it's established that you're not an agent of the Crown, if you weren't at the time of the complaint, the judge has a duty now to protect you from being attacked by statutes that don't apply to you. And this is why. On this side of the equation, you're not a foreigner. You're actually, the other day I even used the word inhabitant, which is I was corrected on because I went to public school. I'm a victim, just like you guys. And habitant is probably a better word, because inhabitant actually makes it a negative word, right? It's like the difference between original and aboriginal. So I talk about that. Again, I think I speak about one of my first videos there. You can be clean. I'm kind of clean today. Or you can be unclean. The two little letters changes the meaning altogether in the English language, the prefix attached to it. Right? So if you want to call it habitant, I don't care. I'm a resident of the land. If you want to call it that, I don't care. Resident in terms of Canada means one of their agents. If you're resident of the land, you suddenly become one of these people again who have inherent rights and freedoms. So, I think people understand what I'm talking about when I say that that's where I was going to go with this. So over here, you already have an estate that was created, which is that's where your share of the Commonwealth is. That's where your rights are protected. That's where all these things have been established for you by right, by entitlement, right? So it's proof of your entitlement. The document isn't it, it's evidence of it. It's evidence of a trust. So there's a lot of people that are starting to now take that and they're starting to do interesting things like, say, what the government does. They give a will and an intent to what they do by passing statutes. That's the will and the intent of the government, right? It's also the will and the intent of the legislative governments and the parliament to recognize you through a name. You can research that. That's also in their own laws. They didn't say which name, but you have to be recognized through one, right? Well, as a man, I'm unlimited capacity. There could be 1 million of these I could represent at any time I choose to. So which one am I representing at that time? I'm giving them evidence on this guy when they pull me over. They charge me with anything. Or sometimes they're just presuming it based on, say, income that's earned. When I attach what to the bank account? Social insurance number. It's a way of tracking everything so they can come back afterwards and charge you under the Income Tax Act and make presumptions that you made that money while performing a function of government. They can tax that. It's the presumption. You don't rebut that. Or you go in, you try to argue you didn't make that money, or some other kind of argument, right? But just because the number is attached to the account, does that factually prove anything? No, they're still just operating on presumptions, and we can rebut those. We can counteract those presumptions. Once we understand what's going on, we can raise or bring in the proper facts that extinguishes their claim, supersedes it. So, all these taxes the government's collecting, because, let me rephrase that. Who is the government collecting taxes for? That's who we think, right? The Crown. They're doing that, right? It's the Crown that always takes you to court. The Crown's collecting on behalf of somebody. The government has to pay the bankers interest on the money they borrow. That's another thing altogether. But ultimately, the money's being collected to pay somebody, some equitable interest holder in all the land and the resources. So when you're going to court and you're being charged, which is a tax, you're being charged because you're a foreign agent to this land, and they can tax foreigners. The foreigners' use of land, foreigners' use of anything, right? They can tax all that, and they're collecting on behalf of us, on this side of the equation. Two different titles. I tell people in earlier videos, without going into why, you are the prosecution and you're also the defendant in any court case. Because they're collecting from you under one title, and they're supposed to be paying you in a different title, minus their administration fees. So all this revenue, everything the government generates, they're supposed to be paying to us over here. But we've never showed up to make the claim, ever. We disappeared. They've never heard from us ever again. We were happy living over here in tax land. Okay? I think most government officials don't know this. A lot of judges don't, and certainly most crowns do not. They absolutely do not. I have the evidence of that. Because the Attorney General in Manitoba, last time I was in jail, when I was having my documents filed into the court record and having my buddy go pick up the copies of the handwritten legal documents I was drafting, and he would take them down to Crown prosecutions because the court was seeing to it that the Crown didn't get copies of my paperwork. They didn't want them to get copies. So when I showed up for court and I said, "Did you not get my paperwork?" "Nope." I said, "Okay." So I had my buddy go down every time now, take copies out of the file, take it to Crown Prosecution Services to stamp it received. The first time we did that, they stamped it received by Crown Prosecution Services. The second time we did it, she made a phone call at the front counter when he went down there, and 2 minutes later, some dude came out of the back room and stamped it received by the Attorney General of Manitoba, and then he buggered off with it to make sure that the Crown in my case did not get the paperwork. Why? I talked about this in my paperwork. They don't want the Crowns to know that because they rely on the Crown Attorney's ignorance of what your rights truly are, because most Crowns probably wouldn't do it if they knew that they are just blatantly violating your rights and harming you, and they're liable for what they're doing. If the Crowns all knew that, they wouldn't do it, because they're actually liable personally for what they're doing, because there's nothing that authorizes them to do what they're doing. We're waking them up in a real hurry. They're just as brainwashed, but people high up do know. The Attorney General normally doesn't. Minister of Justice, they don't. They're voted in every 4 years. It's usually a new guy, but it's the deputy who's usually in that position for life. That's where the orders are coming from. Okay, that guy's office is in Crown Prosecution Services, not the legislative building. So it's usually the deputies, the people that aren't coming in and out of the revolving door every 4 years that know this stuff, and that's how they keep this stuff very tightly lidded. It's kept very tight. Okay? As soon as they started hijacking my paperwork, I realized, okay, the Crowns don't even know. They're trying to keep this paperwork away from them, so they don't. And that's why they kept switching judges on me, too. I think I was on to judge number 8 by the time we were done. Okay? It wasn't the same judge twice. They could say, "Well, I never saw your paperwork." Yeah, you never saw it, eh? How about we recess for 15 minutes so you can read it all? I got copies right here. No, they don't want to do that. So it's starting to get more complicated now, but in a simplistic form, that's what the scam is. They're not violating your rights. They're getting you to act through a title that they can consider it like being in the military, okay? And you're given a rank of private in their military, which is actually, interestingly enough, what it is. It's all military. Their courts are military. When you go to, and that's a good thing. Now we're going to get into jurisdiction. Their courts are military. The yellow fringe flag, everything, admiralty law, it is all military. It's all commerce. Again, last time I was in jail, you muster up to go for dinner, right? They take you out the one building there, and you're all marching down. They walk you right in through the sally port of the building to go into where you're going to eat. Okay, these are all shipping and military terms. And they know it for the most part, right? Even the terms they use in the jail are all military, and they're all to do with like boats, vessels. That's what a sally port is, right? It's on a ship. Why do they call it a sally port? You ever seen that in any other building? I never have. I asked them about that. So everyone's kind of got the gist of that. I'll erase this and we'll start getting into some other stuff then to do with jurisdiction. Let's do a break before we do that.